Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the August IAC meeting. And I'm happy to say that we do have a quorum this morning, and we have a number of interesting items to discuss. And I'm going to ask Cassandra to call the roll of the members that are here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Rivera?
Present.
Secretary Churchill?
Present.
Ms. Everhart?
Present.
Mr. Gibbons is not here. Mr. Casemeyer? Not here. Ms. Lala?
Ask Cassandra to call the roll of the members that are
Mr. Lombardo is not here. And Superintendent Salmon?
present.
And Secretary McCord?
Present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. Mr. Schoen, would you validate this?
Yes, you have 5 members present. You have a quorum. Now Mr. Lombardo has joined. You have over a quorum. And Mr. Gibbons.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody. All right, so we're going to go ahead and begin, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to our executive director just to give us a heads up on a change in the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are asking that item number 5 be pulled from the agenda. It's an item for the cancellation of an HVAC building envelope project at Prince George's County. Prince George County was not able to procure this project by an acceptable procurement method within the 2-year time frame required by statute. Thanks to Secretary McCord, we became aware that the IAC has statutory authority to extend the deadline as a result of the governor's executive order on March 12, 2020, entitled Extending Certain Licenses, Permits, Registrations, and Other Governmental Authorizations, and authorizing suspension of legal time requirements. Your staff are in the process of issuing a public notice that will extend the deadline for projects to be under contract for 30 days after the state of the emergency ends. This extension will give Prince George's more time to procure the project in a way that is compliant with state procurement. We have heard from several LEAs that a pandemic has impacted the speed at which they are moving projects forward, and believe that this will benefit a number of projects throughout the state.
Thank you very much for explaining that. And so we will not have item 5 on our agenda today. So do we have any public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, well then let's move on to the consent agenda. And I'm going to ask if I have a motion to approve the consent agenda. All right, Mr. Lombardo has moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Alvarez has seconded. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. Can you substantiate that, Mr. Schoen?
It was unanimous.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to move on to section 2, which is an informational item about the new maintenance assessment methodology. And Alex Donahue, who is our Deputy Director of Field Operations, will be giving us a briefing on this. And this is in your packet on pages 76 through 88. So good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'm Alex Donahue, Deputy Director for Field Operations, and I'd like to introduce you to Scott Snyder, Acting Manager of our Assessment and Maintenance Group. Scott joined the IAC staff just a handful of months ago and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in school construction and maintenance. Today, Scott and I will update you on the IAC's new Maintenance Effectiveness Assessment, which has replaced the old maintenance inspection. I'll be putting the presentation on my screen in just a moment, but now I'd like to hand it over to Scott. Scott, are you live?
I am. I'm waiting for the presentation.
Great. It's coming up now. Thank you.
It's also in your books.
Good morning, Madam Chair. We're very excited to share with you this innovation because it's a major step forward in how the IAC helps LEAs manage their facility portfolios.
And Scott, I'd like to confirm, can everyone see the presentation title screen now?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, go ahead, please.
Next slide. House Bill 1783 focused the IAC on providing technical assistance to LEAs to help them get the full expected lifespan from their facilities and therefore obtain the needed return on investment for dollars that the state contributes to school construction. And this new assessment is part of that technical assistance. Compared with the old maintenance inspection, this new assessment is targeted to what matters most for facilities' usefulness, reliability, and longevity. It focuses on maintenance structures, processes, and practices, things that make a big difference in the long term. It's more objective because it has a clear and detailed rubric that every assessor uses to rate each building system. It will result in more consistent and comparable ratings across schools, across districts, and across years because it's more objective. It's more transparent because we are publishing the rubric up front so that LEAs know what we're rating their facilities on and how. It provides more easily understood reports because it supports an unlimited number of photos to support and explain the ratings and assessors' comments. And it's more efficient because it uses new smartphone-based app technology for easier assessing and faster review. You all know how important maintenance is for ensuring that the facility fulfills its intended educational functions. The facility has to provide a healthy and safe environment, and the LEA needs to get the full expected lifespan for each facility in order to be accountable to taxpayers who provide the funding for facilities. For this reason, the IAC has been conducting maintenance inspections of school facilities each year since fiscal year 2007. The purpose of the assessment is to help LEAs maintain facilities that are educationally sufficient and fiscally sustainable and get the full expected lifespan from each facility. This means that the building systems work as they were intended to work. There are no preventable issues that cause unplanned facility shutdowns. There is no lost educational delivery functions, and the facility lasts for its expected lifespan of 30 years before it needs to be renovated or 60 years before it needs to be replaced. The original maintenance inspection divided the building systems to components into 35 categories and rated each on a 5-level basis from superior down to poor. Certain categories were weighted more heavily, but the range of weights was very small. Over the past 14 years, IAC staff conducted more than 3,000 inspections, and the information informed LEA's decision-making as well as IAC decisions for funding capital projects. However, in early 2019, as part of our initiatives to improve our technical assistance to LEAs, we evaluated our maintenance inspection process and found substantial room for improvement. IAC staff identified several important issues that would need to be addressed in a new maintenance assessment process. First and foremost, the old inspection did not effectively evaluate the maintenance processes, structures, and practices of the LEAs. It focused more on inferring the quality of maintenance by looking at conditions within the facility. Second, the narrow range of weights on categories meant that the assessment did not adequately differentiate between well-maintained and poorly maintained facilities. The data for the 14-year period show that 96% of all Maryland school facilities scored adequate or better. Third, the IAC had no written rubric against which facilities were assessed, which meant that ratings were overly subjective and could vary significantly based upon which assessor assessed a facility. Fourth, because the inspection score was finalized shortly after conclusion of the inspection did nothing to incentivize LEAs to quickly correct deficiencies identified in the assessment. Over the last several months, we solicited input and feedback from LEAs on the draft. IAC staff folded that feedback into a final version that divides the building systems and components into a streamlined list of 21 categories and weights each category appropriately based upon the extent to which maintenance of the system affects the expected 30-year lifespan of the facility and affects the delivery of educational programs and services within the facility. Weighted most heavily are HVAC systems, fire and life safety systems, and preventive maintenance plans. The new maintenance effectiveness assessment also covers a new set of 4 categories related to maintenance management, including the LEA's use of computerized maintenance management system, its preventive maintenance practices, and whether the LEA's scope of work for custodial services is clear and is aligned to support effective maintenance. I'd like to note here that the automatic generation of preventive maintenance work orders from an LEA's CMMS system is essential to ensuring that very important work gets done. Unfortunately, such auto-generated work orders seem to be rare. Regardless of which CMMS system is used, the IAC should be able to see that PM work orders are being scheduled and completed. IAC staff also created a rubric that clearly lay out the criteria that LEAs must meet to achieve each of the 5 rating levels. The assessment uses the same 5 rating levels as the old inspection: superior, good, adequate, not adequate, and poor. Adequate is given when the maintenance supports obtaining the full expected lifespan from the building system or component. Good and superior levels of maintenance reflect maintenance that extends the lifespan of a system beyond the expected. Not adequate and poor reflect maintenance that shortens the lifespan of the system below what is expected. The rubric tells LEAs and the public what the standards are that the IAC uses to measure maintenance effectiveness. It also supports increased consistency across assessors, across districts, and across time, so that the resulting data are more comparable and more valuable to both LEAs and the state. Most importantly, a rating of adequate means that the IAC is providing a seal of approval that the facility should be reliable and should achieve the standard life expectancy outcomes. Adequate is really a baseline target, and it absolutely is enough to reach for, especially considering that every LEA faces resource constraints. Another innovation in the new assessment is that it allows the assessors to log the existence of any observed deficiency in the building system that poses an immediate or potential threat to the life, safety, or health of occupants of the facility. Identified major or minor deficiencies apply a multiplier and result in a reduced score for the facility in the appropriate category. Because both minor and major deficiencies reflect serious issues that can detrimentally affect the life, safety, or health of occupants and/or the longevity of the facility, each causes the rating value to drop either by 34% for a minor deficiency or by 100% for a major deficiency. Examples of major deficiencies would be the presence of mold, broken window glass, or a non-functional HVAC system. Examples of minor deficiencies would be clogged drains that could result in water infiltrating the buildings, small cracks in the exterior wall facings or concrete stairs, loose flashings on roofs, missing or insufficiently secured ceiling components. The purpose of this feature is to incentivize the quick elimination of deficiencies that can harm occupants or cause a near-term loss of educational function. Unlike the IAC's previous assessment, where the LEA had no opportunity to increase its school's maintenance score until it was assessed again 6 or 7 years later in the new assessment, the LEA has 10 calendar days from receipt of the preliminary assessment to submit an action plan showing it how it will address the deficiency. So long as the LEA submits satisfactory evidence within 30 days that it has taken or is taking action to correct the deficiency, the staff can remove this deficiency note and adjust the score up accordingly. Correcting just a handful of deficiencies can in some cases shift the facility's overall score up an entire rating level. It's this feature that LEAs have been most excited about, or perhaps it's tied with having a rubric that tells them what the assessors are looking for. I think they really like both new features. IAC staff also adjusted the brackets in the overall rating scale. We recognize that the new assessment evaluates more aspects of the LEA's maintenance effectiveness because it directly scrutinizes not just the key components of the facility, but also the LEA's maintenance program and practices. It's a much more stringent look. It goes deeper than the old inspection did, and it looks harder at the details. In light of this, and because it's more closely aligned with best practices in maintenance assessments nationally, we expanded the bracket slightly so that a facility can lose up to 10% of weighted points and still achieve a rating of superior, lose up to 20% and still achieve a rating of good, and lose up to 30% and still receive a rating of adequate. To put the new assessment to work, IAC staff have implemented a web-based assessment app that can be used on laptops, tablets, and smartphones. For any given question or category within the assessment, the app allows assessors to attach both comments, either typed or spoken, and an unlimited number of photos as they walk the facility. The assessor can also flag items that need an LEA response. The app then generates a report that IAC staff send to the LEA for review and response. The report and all associated photos are available to LEAs via the web for easy access. In July, we kicked off the new fiscal year 2021 assessment cycle using the new assessment. As of today, our assessors have assessed 45 facilities in 2 LEAs, and we will be expanding to 4 LEAs next month. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Frederick County Public Schools and Baltimore City Public Schools, who invited us to test the new assessment on some of their facilities in June. This gave us a chance to see how the assessment worked on school facilities in a wide range of settings, from rural to urban. Overall, the feedback from the 2 LEAs has been positive and very helpful, and IAC staff made revisions to the draft assessment's categories and weights. We plan to continue to refine and improve the implementation process to provide the most useful information possible in a timely manner to LEAs and to the public. We are happy to stand for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Excellent presentation and excellent visuals to explain this new process. Are there questions around the new assessment for maintenance?
Not a question, but a comment.
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, I think moving to a rubric-based system is an excellent idea to be able to use it. My question is this information posted and available to the public and parents so they can go in and see what their school looks like in these different categories?
So I'm going to ask Director Gorel to answer that.
Yes, it will be. We're building, having to rebuild our website though to accommodate. So it's not immediately available. We certainly want to give the LEA the opportunity to correct major and minor deficiencies and improve their score. So we will most likely make it available on our public-facing website with about 45 days after we do an assessment. But just like the current annual reports, all of the information will eventually be available to the public.
And schools that are already more than 30 years old, like in Baltimore City, we have a number of schools that are more than 50 years old. Does this impact, the condition? Like, I live in a house that's 100 years old. And I'm constantly, having to see things that didn't exist, I couldn't see before. So I just wonder if this will be, we know that schools that are very old will, have a long way to go to really improve through renovation.
This is not intended to be an optic look at the results that we see. These are the pieces that continue to extend it. If you have a 100-year-old house, it's obviously had maintenance investments along the way. There are components of every facility that when they are past their expected age, they become very hard to maintain and sometimes even unmaintainable, like a very complex HVAC, heating and air conditioning system. You reach a point where you can't even get parts for them anymore. So that type of thing can be very important in the score. However, as we look at the maintenance system, what we want to see is that it's recognized that we have this system that's been broken down. So the maintenance assessment looks at the systems they're using. We look at work order aging. So if we can see that there is a component that had tons of work orders, but it can't be repaired, then they're doing good on their maintenance. If we see something that is in need of maintenance and there's not even a work order that's been generated, that it's being ignored, that's a problem, because we can't identify the need and begin to look for resources to repair it, nor prioritize between all of the various needs. So the tool will tie back together to our overall statewide assessment as well, where we do a facility condition look at all of the components and where they sit on their expected life. So we'll be able to, in a short order, within a year, we'll be able to look at assessment scores for maintenance and assessment scores for conditions and tie the two together and give a heads up of what it will take to improve these conditions. But at the very least, it gives us immediate information of what the opportunities and priorities ought to be locally.
And your goal is to assess every building within the next 12 months?
The assessment is moving forward at this point. We hope to have the assessment to the Board of Public Works on September the 2nd, and we believe that tool will be able to be implemented through the RFP and results pretty visible to everybody within a year.
Okay, thank you.
So just one question. I think it would be helpful, Bob, to explain how the weightings were determined. I know that in the our work group, we had lots and lots of discussions about how things should be weighted. Could you or Scott give us a little background on that?
Go ahead, Scott.
So we determined the weights based off of industry practice and what we thought was going to have the most impact on the overall footprint of the facility, and what would impact more rapidly the effective deliverance of education in the building or life safety. And we took those weights and we spoke to the two LEAs, as I'd indicated in the slide presentation, Baltimore City and Frederick, and shared with them and got their thoughts and feedback as well. And we adjusted them accordingly as we went. But we feel nationally we're in a good place with the weights of the categories as they stand at the moment.
Yes, if I could add, not everything is the same. You can have, just make an example, you can have worn out seats that might not be comfortable, but you can still get to work. But if the engine doesn't work, you're not going to get to work. And so our assessment looks at the major components that are critical. They also are the same systems that when we go to assess the facilities from a overall condition and lifespan, they're the same systems. So we've identified and differentiated what is important and what's lesser important so that we can put our focus on what matters.
Thank you. I think it's just important for people to have that understanding about how that was determined. So thank you very much, Scott. Thank you, Alex. And we look forward to the results of this work that we've been doing over the past 3 years. So now we're going to move on to Maryland Public Schools Fiscal Sustainability, and Cassandra is going to, our program support administrator, is going to give us an update on that, and that refers to pages 89 through 95 of your agenda. Cassandra?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. So the document that's attached to this agenda item, which does start on page 90, is an explainer that's meant to provide a broad overview to the public of the importance of the total cost of ownership on school facilities, and to put into context the IAC's facility standards and commonly used terms that we find can be confusing to the public sometimes, like our educational facilities sufficiency standards and our gross area baselines. We know that the IAC's processes are very complex and nuanced, which makes them difficult for the general public to understand without spending a lot of time digging into the details. Like our newsletters and some other communications that we've been trying to put together lately, this paper is an attempt to distill important information into an easy to understand document that will be accessible to everyone. So I'll talk a little bit about the content, but I won't read this to you. So of course, we all know that our teachers and educators are the single most important factor in a child's education. But we all also intrinsically understand that the environment in which they learn is important. If a student is distracted by too much or too little light or airflow or heat or cold or scents or sounds, the list goes on of the things that will render them unable to focus while they learn. So in the introduction to this paper, which is on page 91, we try to describe the existing research on the impact of school facilities on education. So what we mostly have found, and I think it makes sense to all of us just in our guts, is that if school facilities are bad, it makes education very, very difficult to attain. So we know that the total cost of ownership impacts how well a facility can be maintained, and not just a single facility, but also the total portfolio. So from after we talk in the introduction about what a student needs to learn, we try to explain why reducing the total cost of ownership is so important to improve conditions, so that the positive conditions in a school facility can be afforded not only at that school, but across the entire portfolio, and not only this year, but in perpetuity. So then the paper goes on to briefly explain two different standards that the IAC uses for school facilities. The educational facilities sufficiency standards are a measuring tool. They're just a metric. They're not rules that LEAs have to meet, but they're a measuring tool that are intended to describe the bare minimum that a child needs to learn. Alternatively, the gross area baselines, which are the next thing that we describe, define size only. They don't talk about condition. And all they do is establish the baseline level of funding that a school project can expect to receive from the state. Finally, the paper concludes by explaining how TCO can be reduced, what we can do moving forward to make our facilities more affordable. And then by describing that this is more important than ever because of the funding constraints we are likely going to experience in the next few years because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're sharing this draft document with you today. It's not an action item. You don't have to vote on it, but we would love your feedback before we publish this to the public and push it out to the LEAs. So what I would ask of you today after I answer your questions is that you send us any feedback that you might have over the next week or so, or of course provide it to us here today in this forum, which we'll then incorporate before we post this to our website and push it out to the public. And with that, I can stand for questions.
Questions for Cassandra about the report? Cassandra, I do have one edit, and I will get that to you later today.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
And it's not a question about the report. but the process, will the IAC eventually vote on this as a change in policy?
We had not intended for you to. Of course, we work for you all, so if you're more comfortable with that, we would be happy to bring it to you as an action item. In the past, when there have been documents like this that don't have a force of procedure or regulation, we have presented them to you informally and just asked for your direction on how to proceed without a formal vote.
Okay, thank you.
If I might just, I think this is Secretary McCord, we have to continue to move to educate people about total cost of ownership. I'm applauding all of our efforts to do that, because that is one way we can keep track of what's going on and look at things in a different way. And I think that's terribly commendable. I think I understand exactly what we're trying to do in this assessment, the document, but I'm just going to put out there that I think we need somehow to say what we all believe about giving a nod to the teachers, the educators in the classroom. Our job is basically a facilities commission, but we need to make clear and explicit that the teachers, regardless of the conditions in the schools, that they do great work educating children, regardless of the conditions they find themselves in. And it's not their fault they find themselves in a particular classroom at a particular time. And I don't want this to be, if we acknowledge that clearly up front, then yes. I don't want anybody to implicitly think that we are somehow equating a fantastic facility with a fantastic outcome. We know that's what ultimately we're trying to get to. How can we make the facilities in a place where we can facilitate a good outcome and make the conditions ripe for that? I know exactly where we're going with this, but the concept of that human being in front of our children that's doing fantastic work in a challenging space, we need to, I think, somehow acknowledge that right up front, and then narrow it down to, but our job is about the facility and making sure that everything we do supports that person standing in front of our children so that our children can learn. So if we can somehow, I'm happy to suggest some language and just to set it up that way, that our role isn't to be the teacher. Our role is to make sure that the facilities that our children are learning in facilitate learning, that the facilities that facilitate learning as best we can. So, I just happen to have two sister-in-laws who are teachers, and I just want to make sure that I look at the world trying to make better schools for them to work in a sense. But without the dedicated educators, almost no set of brand new schools is going to produce outcomes.
That's right.
All right, so that's all. It's kind of obvious, but I'd rather state the obvious.
Other comments?
Madam Chair, if I could, and thank you, Secretary McCord, you're absolutely correct, and it just went right past us whenever we were putting this together and thinking about it. It's what we all agree. I got to say that, as we do bring down total cost of ownership, one of the benefits is that it can free up operational dollars for teachers, which is a very good thing, and we want to do that. But the only way we can change total cost of ownership of a portfolio is one project at a time. So that's the purpose of this paper, is to begin to discuss the importance of that thinking and to start focusing every time we're planning a new project. Is this going to make our condition better or worse? And by condition, I mean overall conditions perpetually, as Cassandra has said, over time, one project at a time to bring our total cost of ownership to one that is affordable. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that, all the comments, and certainly share the sentiments of those. All right, we're now moving on to section 4, and this is also a section on the Administrative Procedures Guide to require annual roofing inspections. And Cassandra, you're up again. This is on page 96 of your agenda, and this will be an item that we vote on today. Cassandra?
Yes, Madam Chair. So IAC staff have heard from several LEAs that the requirement for biannual roof inspections are cumbersome and that they're not adding a lot of value. I would note that to maintain most roofing warranties, only annual inspections are required. Of course, if a roof warranty had something more stringent, we would expect that the LEAs would comply with whatever the more stringent requirement was. But we feel like annual is really reasonable. So we looked at our requirement and are recommending that the APG be modified, the Administrative Procedures Guide, be modified to require roof inspections only annually, but with more consistent requirements for submission than we have now. So this is new language that you'll see added in item 7 and item 8. This new language would require that the LEAs provide evidence that the annual roof inspections are scheduled preventive maintenance tasks in their computerized maintenance management system, and that the deficiencies that they identify when they do those inspections also result in work orders in their CMMS. So, this probably sounds familiar to you. This rings very true with what we're trying to accomplish in our new maintenance effectiveness assessment as well. So if the motion is approved today, then the changes will be incorporated into the APG and will be sent out to the LEAs within the next few days. And I can stand for questions.
Questions for Cassandra on this change? Secretary Churchill.
Yes, good morning. Cassandra, has this proposed action been sampled with any of the LEAs? Do we have any feedback as to any impact? And by the way, I agree. We should be looking at roofs on an annual basis.
If I could, Madam Chair, yes, this came to us because as we were looking for preventive maintenance work orders and actual work orders for work being done, we got a lot of pushback that they would rather look at schools once a year and do something that counts, create work orders if needed, than to be able to just check a box that they've been up there twice a year. So this is a collaborative effort. I'm not sure why we were looking at them twice a year, but as Cassandra has already described, the general intent is fully met by going up once a year and reviewing a school. So we support it based upon the requests really that came to us by the LEAs that don't think they can get to all their roofs twice a year, and in some roofs they weren't even getting to. So that's how it came to us.
And as a follow-up, because I'm looking at the additional language in terms of certified qualified inspectors, would that be a hybrid approach? Would an LEA have to go and hire a consultant, or would an LEA be able to train their own personnel to be qualified inspectors?
Yes, we purposely left that loose so that the LEA has the ability to determine that somebody they're having look at the roof is at least qualified to look at the roof. If further definition is required later, I think the language can allow that, but we have not intended that at this point.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretary. Other questions for Cassandra? Hearing none, would you read the motion, please?
Madam Chair, the motion is to approve revisions to the IAC Administrative Procedures Guide, section 102.4C26, as presented in this item, to require annual rather than biannual roofing inspections as a requirement for funding eligibility.
Do we have a motion to approve? Motion from Mr. Lombardo.
So
Do
moved.
we have a second?
Second.
Second from Brian Gibbons. All in favor, please say aye or show your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Schoen?
You had 7 yeses, no nos, no abstentions.
Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Dr. Salmon, you're muted.
Very sorry, folks. We're going to move on now to section 6 of the agenda, facility status change items. We're going to ask Michael Baer from the Maryland Department of Planning to come forward and walk us through these items, which 3 of them we will be voting on. Thank you, Michael. Good morning.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Salmon, for that introduction, and good morning, commissioners. The first of the 4 items is a Baltimore City Public Schools item regarding the transfer of multiple parcels. These are remnant properties that the Board of Commissioners voted in January to transfer to Baltimore City. These several land parcels that no longer serve an educational purpose. Last year, the Baltimore City Schools Office of Real Estate and Permits, together with the Facilities Department, reviewed all the properties in Baltimore City's real property database for which the Baltimore City Public Schools was identified as a responsible agency, and they identified several parcels that were no longer being used for educational purposes. Many of these very small parcels, in fact, was kind of a challenge to figure out how best to identify them. So you can see them in the table below. Of them, I think only 2 are even larger than an acre, and most of these are portions of alleys and so on and so forth that are adjacent to schools. So we present them this way so that for the record, their property identifiers are available if anybody did have a question about any of these.
Questions for Michael? If not, would you read the motion, please?
Sure. The motion is to approve the transfers from the Baltimore City Public Schools Board of Commissioners, BOC, to the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore of several small remnant land parcels not used for educational purposes as identified in the table below, as approved by the BOC on January 14th of 2020.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right, Brian Gibbons moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, I think it was Linda Eberhardt.
Yes.
Yes.
All in favor, please show your hands or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Schoen?
You had 7 in favor, 0 no's, 0 abstentions.
Thanks so much. All right, go ahead, Michael.
Okay, the second one is for Montgomery County Public Schools. This is a transfer regarding the future Charles Woodward High School. The Montgomery County Board of Ed requests approval from the IAC to reacquire from the Montgomery County government a 1.75 acre parcel of land along Edson Lane in Rockville for future use as part of the Charles W. Woodward High School reopening project. This is a situation where the Board of Education previously granted a deed for this parcel to Montgomery County in May of 2005 after declaring it surplus. The parcel is adjacent to Tilden Middle School, which was previously the Charles W. Woodward High School. Staff from Montgomery County Public Schools has been coordinating with the Montgomery County Department of General Services to reacquire the property and deed it back to Montgomery County Board of Education to support the reopening of Woodward High School. Upon approval by the IAC, Montgomery County will prepare a quitclaim deed for the parcel and release it back to the Board of Education. This is a situation where the students that are assigned to Tilden Middle School will relocate to the new building, a new building in the fall. When this new facility reopens as Woodward High School in 2023, it will serve as a holding school for Northwood High School students while that facility is redeveloped. And under the current plans, Woodward would then serve students in the current Walter Johnson High School cluster and the Down County Consortium in 2025.
Questions for Michael? All right, would you read the motion, please?
Okay, the motion for this one is to approve the acquisition by the Montgomery County Board of Education of 1.75 acres of land along Edson Lane, known as tax map GQ61, parcel P336, directly north of Tilden Middle School at 11211 Old Georgetown Road in Rockville, from the Montgomery County government for use as part of the future Charles W. Woodward High School reopening project, adhering to the actions identified in the State Clearinghouse Review, State Identifier MD 202005280422.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right. That was Mr. Lombardo. Do we have a second? Denise Alvarez. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Schoen?
And you had 7 in favor, 0 no, 0 abstentions.
Thank you very much. All right, Michael, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, the third one is approval of 2 easements in Montgomery County. One for a sidewalk adjacent to John Baker Middle School, and the second for some intersection improvement easement near North Chevy Chase Elementary School. You can see the information in the table there.
Questions for Michael? All right, Michael, would you read the motion?
The motion is to approve the conveyance by the Montgomery County Board of Education of the following easements that I mentioned.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Moved.
All right, that was Mr. Lombardo first, and I assume we can have Mr. Gibbons as a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Schoen?
7 in favor and no, 0 no's and 0 abstentions. And thank you for raising your hands.
Great, thanks so much. And now the last item, Michael.
So this is information that is required to go in front of the IAC and be in the packet for record purposes. And this is just informational regarding a couple of Baltimore City items, one at Rosemont Elementary School and one at Fairmont Hartford, building number 456. This is just informational. If anybody has any questions, let me know.
Questions for Michael on this item? Secretary Churchill.
No question.
All right, hearing no other questions. Thank you, Michael, for your presentation. And now we're going to turn it over to Jamie Bridges, our Baltimore City Project Manager, who is going to give us an update on the HVAC status report. Thank you, Jamie. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. It's good to see you all. Before you to deliver item 7, an informational item, a status report on the extra $15 million for Baltimore City HVAC projects, and then I'll stand for follow-up questions or comments. Item 7 can be found on page 103 and 104 of the meeting agenda. The status report is as of August 3, 2020. City Schools has restarted design on the Callaway Elementary unit vent replacement project. The project at Callaway had been on hold until the full scope and cost of work for projects at Thomas Johnson and Windsor Hills were known. The reason for such a workflow is because equipment in city schools is old and because equipment replacement over the years has been piecemeal. It is not uncommon for design or construction to reveal the need to expand the scope or cost of work. If you have an old house like I do, you know what I mean. Another relevant example, a recent example, is demo work for the extra $15 million project at Liberty Elementary revealed numerous instances of super corroded distribution piping, and thus the need to expand the scope and cost of the work to include the replacement of all the distribution piping. If the Liberty Elementary project had been funded through the Capital Improvement Program, then city schools would have to either cover the additional cost or cancel the project. In order to minimize the time needed to complete a maximum number of these mission critical projects, the E15 program was specified to provide city schools with an additional option. That would be to adjust or cancel allocations to other projects in the program in order to cover the additional cost. So city schools can adjust the scope for Callaway Elementary based on the bid docs for the other 2 projects. For the moment, there are 7 of these projects that are operational, 7 are under construction, 2 are in construction procurement, and the 3 that I mentioned are in the final stages of design for a total of 19 E15M projects. Of those projects, Of those 19 projects, 15 of them are operational or not behind, 3 are behind less than a month, and 1 is behind over a month. Your approval of item 1 included the approval of a contract for the boiler replacement project at Harlem Park Elementary Middle, which moves this complicated project into the construction phase and closer to off the exception list. Finally, as far as contract health goes, we have $14,020,608 of the $15 million allocated. At this point, we have 11 design contracts for about $1.27 million, 6 construction projects for about $8.054 million. So total, we have about $9.3 million have been allocated, been contracted. And actually, with the approval of the Harlem Park contract, that would move us to about $10.3 million, or close to 75% of the dollars have been contracted. This concludes the extra $15 million for each project status report, Madam Chair. So as I promised, I will now stand or sit for questions and or comments.
Thank you, Jamie. Again, the chart is extremely helpful. I appreciate the fact that you've been able to adapt it to all of our requests over the past 6 months. Do we have questions for Jamie on any of this update? Secretary Churchill?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Jamie, again, it's always good to get an update on these projects and to see that they're going along very well. I do have 2 questions. One on Harlem Park. This has been one that obviously you've now cleared the hurdles and will be able to move on. Is the or anticipated finished date the end of the year? Based on everything that we're going through now with COVID, is that still, is that an accurate date?
At this time, Secretary Churchill, I think that is a good question. And, you know, I'm in communication with city schools at this time. I would expect more information on that at the next meeting. It just is a matter of how quickly they can get that contract moved through and that job underway. But it is Harlem Park is a beast of a building. It's very interesting and complicated. So I will get back with you on that one as soon as I know.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, and I certainly understand how you have framed what we call in the industry unforeseen conditions, how that can affect the project. We experience it all the time with our state complex. But you mentioned that the LEA could adjust or cancel the project. When there is a unforeseen condition, and normally, of course, this goes to contingency, does the state is the state participating in for unforeseen conditions, or is Baltimore doing something different?
Well, in this case, you know, if there were additional funds to allocate, then we are, as in the commission is permitted to expand the budget and reallocate additional funds. In this case, there is not a lot of money left for allocation. The city is going to cover, as I understand, the unforeseen conditions at Liberty to the tune of about $1 million extra for pipe distribution replacement. That's significant, and it is not the only instance in this program where where Baltimore City Public Schools has stepped up and covered a difference when unforeseen conditions were encountered. That's the kind of thing I would like to track more over time, and you'll hear more about it. But for now, the extra scope of work at Liberty is significant because, well, a lot of pipe. So yeah, the city's covering that.
We'll certainly understand that. Again, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Other questions for Jamie? All right, seeing none, thank you again, Jamie, for your updates. And I think we have reached the end of our agenda. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Secretary Churchill has a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Secretary McCord. All in favor, please show your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Schoen?
It is unanimous.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for your service. Please stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again next month.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.